I just wanna talk about this thing that's in my brain. It keeps me from wanting to go on, but I want some gain. Maybe a little fame. Yeah, oh yeah.
Welcome back to the We the Patriots podcast. I'm your host, Sal Asante, and things definitely look weird today. I'm sitting here in my car. I got baseball practice lined up in about 45 minutes, and who better to talk to when I got baseball practice than a baseball author himself? I would love to introduce everybody here. I have Kirk McKnight. How you doing, Kirk?
Good, thanks. Hi, everybody.
so
Hello, everybody.
So Kirk wrote, well, I want to say you wrote this book technically already, but you're rewriting this and putting a new spin on, and I would venture to say you put a pretty big change on your angle on Vin Scully. Especially with his passing recently and the passing of some of our older legends in the game as of late.
Yeah, I mean, the book got into the editor, the manuscript got into the editor on August 1st, and then Vin passed away on August 2nd. So that changed the whole thing, because I basically reached out to the editor and asked her if you can basically change up or edit the first 32 chapters of this book. I'd like to do something to basically celebrate and commemorate Vin Scully. And she said, okay, you got 2 weeks. And so what I did was I reached out that day, put the feelers out to about 50 or so broadcasters, and I got about 35 responses. Just a lot of broadcasters sharing their own personal memories of Vin Scully. And so I completely wiped a chapter that was in the original 2 editions from the book. And that was a book in which, coincidentally, it was a chapter in which we talked about voices of the past, but now Vin is the voice of the past. And so that chapter, is gone. And a good chunk of a different chapter on ballparks of the past was taken out, mainly because I added about 25% content to the book overall with all the different things that have been happening. So this book is definitely changed and different from the original hardcover edition and even from the paperback edition that came out in 2017.
So what was your original intention in writing that first book? And was that your first ever published piece of work?
It was my first ever published book. And my original intention was to basically provide a backdrop for how baseball is as a venue overall. Each ballpark is different, and each ballpark brings with itself its own peculiarities, its own idiosyncrasies. Baseball is the only major sport that is not uniform. It is a universal sport when it comes to dimensions. Different ballparks play different ways, and they're in different regions. So that was the main focus beginning. And then I thought, well, there's plenty of books that sit there and talk about this ballpark. Go to this ballpark and go to section 103 and have this hot dog. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to talk about the history of the ballpark, and who better to do it than the broadcasters who are there longer than a lot of the people. A lot of times you'll sit there and you'll find out a broadcaster's been going for 40 years. Vin Scully broadcast for 67 years, something that is unprecedented. And
how about some of them outlive stadiums?
They outlived the city. In Vin's case, because he moved with Brooklyn out to Los Angeles. And yes, there's many instances where there are broadcasters who would compare the way the ball played in the old stadium to the new one. And you can see the effect on some of these star players. For example, I'll give one example. David Wright had such a strong offensive showing at Shea, and his numbers started to drop off when they went over to City, because City Field, where the New York Mets play, is much more pitcher oriented than the way Shea was. Shea played more to the hitters, and City plays more to the pitchers, it seems. And
without a doubt, especially to right field with all those lefties.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So there we have that, and Joe Mauer going from the Metrodome with the Twins to going to Target Field. He would have a heyday in the Metrodome. A lot of the hitters would, but Target Field plays pretty deep for hitters.
It does.
Cold weather can be really problematic, especially in the early months of the season, for hitters trying to really get their power numbers up.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially for, I mean, we'll stray away a little bit, but for a guy like Mauer, one of my childhood heroes, watching him grow up, like when I had to play catcher, he was the guy I molded my game off of. And he was just a guy that seemed to want to hit the ball hard. He didn't really look for power. So when the place was concealed and the elements weren't as much of a factor, he just played amazing. He played off the walls. Not to say he didn't afterward, but his game changed. Yeah, for sure.
Right.
But the announcers carried right through.
They carried right through. And that was the thing, because when you look at Minnesota, people are wondering, why in the world would you open up an open air ballpark in Minnesota? You know,
Right.
when the opening day is late March, early April. And I mean, they do have a point there, but also the broadcaster, Dick Bramer for the Twins, he said, I've been inside for 28 years. I appreciate the free and fresh air.
Right, right. I can imagine. And it feels more like baseball being outside, especially in the summer.
Yeah. I mean, and that was, I mean, however long he was at that's when I talked to him, it was just barely maybe the second or third season of Target Field. So, he was still just getting used to that open air.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, one question I definitely wanted to ask was aside from Vin Scully, what would you say was your most anticipated section of the book to write?
I mean, you have to look when you talk about unique ballparks, you have to look at Fenway and the Red Sox, because it is definitely a model. It became the model for the park that actually is looked at the model for this rejuvenation of ballpark differentiation. That was, sorry, two big mouthful words there, but when you look at Camden Yards
Yeah,
and in Baltimore, that really set the precedent in this new era. And that
which is
precedent
one of
would have
my
been
favorite parks.
right. And that precedent wouldn't have been set without ballparks like
Correct.
Fenway or Wrigley that are built into these neighborhoods. A lot of times you'll see a ballpark built out in the sticks. That way it doesn't create a parking problem. There's all kinds of different things, but Fenway, Wrigley, and some of these newer ballparks that are kind of adopting that style of Fenway and Wrigley, they're right there in the middle of the neighborhoods, just like in San Francisco where the Giants play now.
Absolutely.
If you think about Candlestick Park, it was just out. It was kind of adjacent to a neighborhood, and that can be a pain in the butt when you're leaving a Monday night football game. But it
Yeah.
also wasn't right. Candlestick compared to Oracle Park is huge. It's just huge because
Right.
Oracle, you're talking about some prime real estate in one of the richest cities in America, and you're
Right on
trying
the
to
bay.
build a ballpark right in the middle of all that, and they managed to do it, and they
Yeah.
overcame the odds. That the Port Authority wanted those dimensions to be way shorter than they are now, and they're looking at them like, we can't do that. But the Port
Mhm.
Authority was saying that because of the waterfront, and they won their argument, or the team won its argument and basically had it to
Right.
the dimensions that it wants. But you can see what kind of a situation that creates when you have that little space.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, is there any back home bias from that? Who was your team growing up?
Well, my team growing up was the Braves because I had access to them
Okay.
on TBS, and
Gotcha.
my favorite player was Del Murphy. I actually wrote an argument for Del Murphy's legitimacy for the Hall of Fame back in 2019. When Dell got traded to the Phillies, there went my connection because I wasn't able to see him every day. So there went my fandom of the Braves. And then I kind of bounced around, and Cecil Fielder was my favorite player when he got traded to the Yankees. So then the Yankees became my team. So that brought back, Yankees are, and a lot of people would call me a bandwagoner for that, but it was my favorite player going to that team. And when you follow the Yankees, especially now with technology and all these TV packages, MLB Network always plays the YAS games. So
Yes.
if you got the
Yeah.
MLB Network, you're most of the time, especially when somebody like Aaron Judge is chasing the home run record, and no matter where you're tuned into, they throw it right back to that. And how many of us got to watch Michael Kay and David Cohn and Paul O'Neill broadcast throughout August and September because of that home run chase.
Right. The team was sinking, but he was definitely a light in the tunnel. You're just giving me chills, and I guess I might as well ask you now. Um, how was it doing the Michael Kay and David Cohn section of the book there? I didn't read it myself, but I'm saving it in order. But I was making sure that you had it in there in the book so I could read it, and then sure they're on the list.
With Michael Kay, it was great because he had an understanding of what I wanted, but he also had the practicality of his own schedule. I met Michael Kay after doing an interview with John Sterling at Angel Stadium. We actually did most of the interview in Michael Kay's booth, and he was in the commissary for Angel Stadium. So I approached him and I said, I just used your booth, like kind of an icebreaker. Thank you for the use of your booth. Now, Michael Kay's probably thinking, who's this random person just thanking me for using my workspace? And I did not allow this. I did not sign off on this. And I let him know what I was doing, and I let him know who I talked to and that I just talked with John. And he basically had, if you guys can understand, Michael Kay is just so busy. You guys can see that there's the K-Rod broadcast during the regular season, it seems, not to mention his own broadcast of Yankee games. So he clearly has a busy schedule, even busier now than he did probably in 2014 when I approached him. So he just said, could I just email you this? And I'm like, sure. To me, that's like, great. I don't have to sit here and transcribe the interview for an hour and a half and write it down on a computer. I'm such a dinosaur with these things that like I'm sitting there listening to it and typing it after. So he was so generous and so willing to help, even no matter when I asked. And I was just always appreciative of that. But we also kind of understood each other's schedules, or specifically I understood his schedule and how demanding it is, and he was still able to put that in. And there's a couple of things that he shared with me that aren't in the book, just for the purposes of just the length and restrictions as far as the content and page count. But
Right.
He was broadcasting Kluber's no-hitter in an empty stadium, nobody around, and he's sitting there broadcasting.
COVID years.
And I believe that game took place in Texas, but he was broadcasting at Yankee Stadium in his booth before nobody, and he's broadcasting a no-hitter. I mean, he's only done that a handful of times, obviously, in his career, and he's doing it with nobody around and just watching it on a monitor.
Right. Oh my goodness. And what was his experience with that? How did he feel about that whole COVID time in general?
Well, that particular game, he said it was very kind of eerie. Broadcasting in an empty stadium, it seemed kind of eerie and dark. It seemed lonely to him as well. And not specifically, he didn't comment on the COVID restrictions, but I was able to have, with this new edition, I was able to go back and talk with broadcasters who had their restrictions because of everything that people were doing. The San Diego Padres radio broadcast team, they broadcast the team's first ever no-hitter, Joe Musgrove's no-hitter in April of 2021. They were broadcasting that game back in San Diego in the visitors' TV booth. This is a game that's happening 1,300 miles away in Arlington. It's because of just the restrictions for visiting broadcasting. So they had to call that game, but they were basically, they're radio broadcasters. So, they were basically doing what they're hired to do.
They're kind of used to it. Yeah.
They were painting the picture. And that's one perfect example, because these are like fold out tables, like doing makeshift kind of production crew here, fold out tables. They're kind of sitting next to each other, but like kind of also just like it seems like they're apart. And Mike Wilner for the Toronto Blue Jays was similar to that too, because the Blue Jays weren't allowed to travel. They were traveling. They didn't have a home game for almost a year and a half.
Yeah, they were playing up in Buffalo. Were they playing in Buffalo?
They were playing in Dunedin, Florida, where their spring training site is, and then they were bouncing around different ballparks. It's like they had no home until like late June or maybe late July of 2021, and then once they got home, they made a push, and they just barely missed making the playoffs by a game.
Absolutely, yeah. No, that was so fun to watch. And then last year, of course, they made it in, but flopped a little bit. So nowadays when you're watching, you would say you might root for the Yankees. I'm sure you have heartstrings in quite a bit of cities after talking to all these people. What city I want to say is gonna really strike you the most? What are you gonna remember the most about one particular city that you visited?
Well, I haven't visited all 30 ballparks. I wish I had gone. I wish I have, before this book coming out, I wish I had gone to Camden Yards, which I will eventually. It's kind of like a bucket list, but I think that even more so than Fenway Park, as far as my list item, because
Don't go to Fenway.
well, I've got to just to cross it
I
off.
know.
But
I know. That's the Yankee fan in me.
no, yeah, and that's the thing. Like
I've been there.
when
Yeah.
people ask me, if you're a fan, I say I'm a fan of all the teams.
Agreed.
And I am a fan of the broadcasters. And I've been able to, if you read the book, you're going to see plenty on the Yankees in their chapter, but you're going to see plenty on the Yankees in many other chapters because the Yankees' downfall was,
Right.
one person's misery is another person's victory kind of
Right.
thing. And so, you have most memorable games for an opposing broadcaster to the Yankees. And so you can seeing that, like with Joe Castiglione, seeing, him calling the Red Sox coming from down 0-3 and winning that World Series, and
Right.
even beating the Yankees in 2018 in the wild card, not the wild card, but the division series, en route to the 2018 championship. You kind of like feel for them, or not feel for them, but feel happy for them, I guess. Feel for them is a sympathy term. I'm saying you feel happy for them. You feel grateful alongside them for the experiences they've been able to have. And there's plenty of those throughout the book where the Yankees were, the
On the butt end of
losing
it.
team. For example, obviously Arizona Diamondbacks, Game 7, 2001. Excellent
Absolutely.
part of the book talking about Tim McCarver's call. Greg Schulte of the Diamondbacks, obviously talking about everything that led up to it, and so many things that many people who probably have forgotten about would not even know. Just different things that didn't happen in that ninth inning. Scott Brocious not making the throw across the diamond after
Right.
Mo threw it to him immediately on that bunt attempt. They said that Scott Brocious would have had that runner by about 4 or 5 steps if he'd have just fired across, but he wasn't thinking that. He just, he just threw it, put it in his pocket, and there we go, 1 out. No, you got to get that second out. Who knows what would have happened if he had gotten that second out? The tables would have completely turned. The pitching change or the pitching style would have been different. All those kinds of things, and these are things that broadcasters bring up. And after the fact, now we can all be kind of like Monday morning quarterbacks, but the broadcasters knew this at the moment. And Tim McCarver talking about the infielders playing in the drawn in infielders, but with Mariano's pitching style, he pitches in on the hitters, and it leads to those kind of bloops into the deep part of the infield. And since everybody was playing so far in, like that ball went over Jeter's head, and Gonzalez scored without a problem because they played the infield in so much.
Right.
That bloop would have been caught, if they'd have been
Absolutely.
not been drawn in. So it's like so
Just regular.
prophetic what
Yep.
Tim McCarver did in calling that. And Joe Buck is like high-fiving him as he's announcing the Diamondbacks winning the World Series.
Mhm. Yep. That's an amazing moment because I look back on that. That was before I could even remember anything, but I look back and I'm like, how did you guys mess that one up? You're always Monday morning quarterback, and especially when you weren't there.
Right.
That's me 15 years later as a Yankee fan looking back, right? So I'm thinking now, do you work in and around baseball daily? What do you do for work?
I'm actually an editor of a newspaper, small town newspaper in a little
Very
small
nice.
town called Wickenburg, Arizona. And we're about 50 miles outside of Phoenix. So, I mean, the spring training, I was party to spring training this last month, and I was able to do some interviews like in the ballparks for promoting the book. And I was able
Right.
to take in, plenty of spring training, putting flyers on the windshields during Dodger games because the
Yep.
flyer has Vin Scully's face on it. And obviously Dodger games will draw a ton. And so I was able to take full advantage of being this close to spring training. It's definitely something. You got a city like Phoenix, where there's about almost 5 million people in the city limits all around the valley, and you got
Right.
baseball spread throughout the valley. There's
Did you
10.
get to take in any baseball?
I'm sorry.
Did you get to take in any baseball yourself in
I
spring
went to
training
5
this year?
games this year, and it was great. I
Okay.
saw 4 new sites that I hadn't. So I've seen only the only site that I haven't seen out here in spring training is where the Angels play in Tempe. But there's
Okay.
10 ballparks here in spring training. I think there's like maybe 11 or 12, maybe 13 in Tampa, where the Grapefruit League is. So there's a
Right.
whole nother ballpark tour right there. Just spring training alone is a ballpark tour that's a lot more feasible and plausible,
Right.
because you're really just, the farthest park to the, one point to the other is probably about 45 minutes from one to the
Right.
other.
Right. No, it's definitely a challenge I want to get to. So with your 5 games seen, might be asking a lot, but you got any guys to look out for that are maybe a little under the radar heading into the year?
I mean, I went and saw the Guardians play in Scottsdale, and
Mhm.
I'm already seeing where I'm going to put Stephen Kwan on my fantasy team.
Okay.
That team is pretty loaded offensively. When you see that they brought in Josh Bell, and Stephen Kwan was already kind of making a name for himself last year, as
Absolutely.
somebody to look out for. He was making some serious moves and making
Especially against the
some,
Yankees.
huh?
Especially
Right.
against the Yankees in that series.
Right, and he's somebody that you need to look out for. DeGrom pitching in Texas is something that people need to realize. 7 years ago, or let's see. Well, I mean, the Rangers have been in their new home since 2020, so we'll say 4 years ago.
Mhm.
That old Globe Life Park, the old ballpark where they played, that was a hitter's paradise, and pitchers hated it. Now, Globe Life Field is a little bit of a different story.
Absolutely.
I don't think that DeGrom makes that deal to come to the Rangers if they're in their old ballpark. Because
Couldn't
I
agree
mean,
more.
and now I watched him pitch this last Saturday in about 3 or 4 innings, and he struck out the side. As soon as he was out, the Padres just jumped all over the relievers. So
Mm.
I would say look for DeGrom. He's back in he was in a pitcher friendly ballpark in City Field, and he's going to be one in Globe Life Field, I feel, as well. And they will close that stadium. They will close that roof a lot throughout the season,
Sure.
which definitely helps the pitcher and not the hitter. When those ballparks who have those closable roofs, especially when the air is hot in
Yep.
desert situations, or very humid, high sun scorched areas like Dallas, that ballpark being closed is all a pitcher can ask for. And then you open
Right.
it,
Yeah.
that's all the hitters can ask for, is to be open and let that wind start carrying that ball out.
The wind and that hot air rising, they just want to backspin one right in the gap and watch it fly. That's all they
Yeah.
want to do. Yep,
Right.
absolutely. So you're out in Arizona. You have any sort of ties over with the Diamondbacks over there?
No, just they're friendly, and I've covered stories for the newspaper, and saw people from the Diamondbacks personnel, and so they're nice enough to get me tickets to the game if ever I ask. I don't try to ask too much, but they've been pretty compliant and helping me out, because they're just nice people. And I'm
Right.
telling you, like, I would go to the games with my wife and her grandparents and my daughter. And my wife's grandparents, they're like in their late 80s, and the staff there are just so accommodating. They're so nice, and they don't take tips. They do it out of the kindness of their hearts. They refuse tips if
Wow.
you try to. And I thought, and I told them, I said, I've been to 20 ballparks, and I don't think I've ever seen anybody as amiable and just polite and courteous and just giving such great customer service as you guys.
Wow, that's really impressive. If I had any access to them or anything even close to what you have, I would love to watch them. So now a question on them. Did you get to watch, you had to get to watch Dalton Varsho in person. How was he when you got to see him in a ballpark?
He's such a likable character. That's the thing. He's
Good.
likable, and he does, I never actually met him, but they,
Of course.
on Bally Sports, which who carries the Diamondbacks, they always have their
Mhm.
little whatever interviews they have, and they put them in game and stuff like that. They tape them and have them
It
for the
must
game.
up.
And Dalton is one of the, those who and he's up in Toronto, isn't he? now.
Yeah, he got traded away. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I can go watch him in a Yankee game. That's why I'm thinking about it.
Right. And yeah, just thinking about like a person who would be a great ambassador for his position. I definitely think he's the kind of person that it's always great to see somebody who's willing to take time out of their free schedule and do that, because they're not, no way coaches are letting them sit there and go like, yeah, coach, I'm gonna have to be about an hour late. I've got to film it. Yeah, no, that doesn't fly with the manager of
Exactly.
a baseball team. So this is going to be in their own personal time, and anybody that takes that time out to talk with and actually have a special basically filmed on them, that kind of stuff takes a little bit of time. We only see like a 5 or 10 minute segment, but that kind of filming takes a lot longer than that.
Yeah, how many takes, how many cuts, how many edits? Yep.
Right.
How much of it is never seen? Exactly.
Right.
Hmm. So I just want to kind of wrap it up by just talking about what are your plans with this book? So I know you were planning to release it sometime in April. Do you have a date?
Well, yeah, the publisher is already shipping it out.
Beautiful.
So, I mean, if you actually get on Roman.com, that's Roman with a W, you can order the copy now. It's already being shipped out. If you use coupon code RLFANDF30 through the publisher, you get 30% off.
Perfect.
Amazon is going to start shipping it out April 12th.
There you go.
So, I mean, sometimes people like to go the Amazon route, and that's fine. They have Amazon Prime, they got free shipping, but it's about $11 cheaper on the publisher's website if you want to use that coupon code. But it's available for pre-order now. If you order
Very
through
nice.
Amazon, you can get it in a couple of weeks. If you order through the publisher, you can get it in 3 days.
Beautiful. So I will have all those links down in the description. That way you can get access to the book. And what is the title exactly?
The Voices of Baseball, the game's greatest broadcasters reflect on America's pastime.
Beautiful. Because there was no way I was going to remember every single word of that. So just to close it out though, so your feelings on baseball, where did you originate kind of your feeling and love for baseball? I know you kind of mentioned before you had some players, Cecil Fielder, and I think you said Murphy as well. Is it Dale Murphy? So if I had those type of players, I'd definitely get into the game. But did you play as a kid?
I did. I played a little bit, Little League, and they made me catcher though, and I hated it. So I resented
One of the
it.
worst positions, isn't it?
It's just grueling when you're a 9 or 10-year-old lugging that equipment around, and the pitcher's not always throwing the ball the best, and so it's hitting the backstop a lot. And I can't say that I was the best catcher, and pass balls were probably my specialty. I probably led the league in pass balls, but I really lost my flavor for playing baseball doing that. But I've always loved baseball. I've always loved going to the games. I really enjoy going to hockey games and baseball games. Those are my two favorite. So even though I stopped playing, it always kind of was something that amazed me. And baseball is one of those sports where you can take an interest in it from a scientific approach. I love the movie Moneyball because anybody who is
such a good movie.
It's such an amazing movie, and anybody who has any kind of or passion for baseball will know these things that come up in the movie, and not everybody's going to know them. Not everybody's going to know about on-base percentage. They're not going to know about WAR. They're not going to know about stealing versus hit and run or anything like that. They're some of these things you break it down, and honestly, like, the game is changing back as we speak, which is great. And that is one thing that I hope is going to rejuvenate the country and the world's interest back to baseball, because the games are speeding along. Having gone to 5 games in the spring training, you realize that pitch clock is really moving the game along.
That was going to be my last question, was the new rules that you got to see. Yeah.
Yeah.
You like them.
What?
You like them. You like the new rules.
I do like them because I like when you have the shift on, you're going to notice a huge inflow of home runs, walks, or strikeouts. It's like
the 3 true outcomes go up dramatically.
Yeah, and so and where have the stolen bases been? If you think about the stolen bases, when I was a kid, Ricky Henderson would steal more bases in a month than
100 bases.
What?
100 bases in a year he would steal.
Right. And then some of these guys are like stealing 36 and they're leading the majors. So it's like,
Exactly.
I mean, Whit Merrifield is actually my favorite player now, and he led the league twice, 2 years in a row in stolen bases, or he led the league in hits one of the years and stolen bases and hits the next year. And now hopefully that's another player to look out for if he can find his groove in that Toronto lineup. Now with this switch being gone, he might start to be the Whit Merrifield that everybody knew him up until last year. Last year was a pretty much an anomaly year in my opinion, for Whit. And his fantasy value is way down, and that's fine with me because I know what kind of value he holds. And in that lineup, that's a great hitting lineup. And with this whole shift being gone, and with the pitch clock, those are the things that make Whit Merrifield a more deadly opponent hitting wise.
Absolutely. And correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't he a switch hitter?
I don't know if he is or not. I wouldn't doubt it because he's a switch fielder. He plays second base, he plays outfield. But if you get in one of those rotisserie leagues where he doesn't have to, or you get in one of those week-to-week leagues where you don't have to actually have him play that position, but he shows up on it in the sheets and all that, get him because you can throw him in second or in outfield. I'll probably have to use him as an outfielder if I draft in my rotisserie league because I don't think he's seeing second base action in that lineup.
I don't think so either now. But other than that, Kirk, I really just wanted to thank you. I mean, this is an awesome opportunity. I'm really going to enjoy the rest of your book. I know I only got to hammer through like 10 parts of it so far. So I'm really loving it so far. I hope that everybody out there gets to go take a look at this. Take a look at some of the work that you've done. It's really impressive. And I just got to commend you on creating something that I truly believe will kind of work towards making this game more accessible to more people, kind of like what you were saying before. Seems like baseball is kind of getting thrown into the weeds a little bit, and it's kind of on us as baseball fans, I think, to bring it back.
It really is. And the broadcasters, I mean, I've talked to broadcasters who have said, contemplated retirement, but have held off the retirement because they're interested in to see how the flow goes on this season with the pitch clock. And that to me says something. If you're at the time of 40, 45 year career and you're willing to put one more in just to see how this works out, I think it's kind of their way of saying, I want to end on a note that makes me look back on this game, not in, with, a sense of like disgruntledness.
Right.
And I know that that's probably not even a word, but you don't want to look back disgruntled. You want to look back, isn't that a song by the Oasis? Don't look back in anger. That's a great line to think of the broadcasters who are contemplating retiring. Don't look back in anger. Look back at this season as something that you've wanted for a long time and now you're getting.
Oh man, I love that. What a great way to end it. Well, Kirk, like I said, again, thank you so much. And to everybody else, go check out his book. You're going to get both versions if you'd like. You had the original hardcover, and now you have versions out, it seems like, on every platform possible to buy books. So go check out the links in the description for that. Otherwise, I hope to see everybody else soon, maybe next week, maybe a couple weeks. For now, peace out.
Thank you.
I'ma make all these bitches say, damn, I wish I would've fucking stayed. I wanna be something, not nothing. Trapped inside my dream and I'm running away from these demons. But the feeling's so good, I'ma keep dreaming.